Gymnastics tells you it will take everything you have, and if you love it enough, you give it willingly. Emma Miller gave it everything. She gave it her childhood, her body, her complete and total belief that if she worked hard enough, the sport would carry her somewhere worth going. What nobody told Emma, what nobody tells any of them, is that some gyms will take everything you give and still leave you with nothing to fall back on when the worst moment of your life arrives. The gym smelled like chalk and old rubber mats. It always did. Emma Miller had been breathing that smell since she was 6 years old, and by the time she was 20, it felt more like home than her actual home did. The training hall in her small city was not much to look at. The ceiling was low and marked with water stains from a roof that had leaked 2 winters ago and never been properly fixed. The foam pit at the far end of the floor was deeper on one side than the other because the blocks had compacted unevenly over years of use and nobody had replaced them. The uneven bars stood in the center of the space under a single bank of fluorescent lights, and every afternoon, Emma stood beneath them and did what she had always done. She worked. She was not from a country where gymnastics was a national obsession. Her federation was small and underfunded, the kind of program that showed up to international competitions and got politely ignored by commentators who had bigger stories to cover. They had been suspended from international competition once, years before Emma joined the program, over unpaid license fees. The kind of suspension that tells you everything about where gymnastics actually sits in the priorities of a developing sports nation. Not at the top, not even close. When they came back quietly. A few girls, a few coaches, a training hall that needed work it was never going to get. Emma was the best thing they had, and everyone knew it. She was 20 years old that spring, and the Continental Championships were 6 weeks away. Her teammates were going to compete for qualification spots. Some of them had a real shot at making it to the global stage, and Emma was the one they all looked to when things got hard in training. Because Emma did not quit. She had never quit. When the equipment was wrong, she worked around it. When the mats were thin, she landed cleaner to compensate. When the bars were older than they should have been and the grips wore down faster than ideal, she chalked her hands more carefully and adjusted her timing. She had built her entire gymnastics life around making the best of what she had, and what she had was never quite enough, and she made the best of it anyway. The uneven bars were her best event. She had a natural feel for the rhythm of the swing, the precise moment when her body had to release, and the precise moment when her hands had to find the bar again. Her coach had been training her on a new release move for 3 months. It was a skill that would raise her difficulty score and give her a real chance at a medal at the championships. It was also a skill that required a foam pit with consistent depth on both sides, proper bar tension, and ideally a coach with recent experience training athletes at this level of release difficulty. She had one of those 3 things. She had the coach, who was dedicated and hardworking and doing everything he could with the resources available to him. The pit was uneven. The bar tension had been adjusted twice that month because the hardware was aging. None of this stopped them. This was the world they trained in. On the afternoon of May 17th, the training hall was warm from the afternoon sun coming through the high windows on the east wall. Emma had been working well that day. Her warm-up sets had been clean, and her timing on the earlier release attempts had felt right. The kind of feeling that makes a gymnast believe the hard work is finally locking into place. Her coach watched from just outside the crash mat, his eyes tracking her every movement with the focused attention of someone who had spent 20 years learning to read a gymnast's body in the air. He gave her the nod. She stepped up to the low bar. She swung up into her first giant, then the second. The bar vibrated slightly under her grip. It always did on the 3rd swing, something to do with the mounting hardware, something they had learned to account for. She built her speed through the 4th swing and launched into the release. Her body rotated through the air the way it was supposed to. Her hands came around to find the high bar, and then something was wrong. A fraction of a degree in her shoulder angle, a half rotation more than she needed, the kind of error that the human eye cannot catch in real time. Her hands missed the bar. She fell. She did not fall into the center of the pit. She fell toward the shallower side, the side where the foam blocks had compressed down over years of use, the side that was 4 inches shallower than it was supposed to be. Her neck took the impact. The sound was not loud. It did not need to be. Her coach was moving before she had stopped moving, across the mat and into the pit, calling her name. She did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was very quiet and her body was very still. The ambulance took 11 minutes to arrive. If you think that's where this story ends, stay with it, because what happened in the next 48 hours is the part that will stay with you. Hit subscribe and don't move. This gets harder before it gets any easier. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Emma had fractured 2 vertebrae in her neck, and the doctors worked carefully and methodically to stabilize the damage and relieve the pressure on her spinal cord. Her parents sat in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee, and her coach sat with them because he did not know where else to go. Her teammates were still at the training hall when the news came through, and they stopped what they were doing and sat on the floor and waited. The way people wait when they do not have enough information to do anything useful except stay together. When the surgeon came out, he said the procedure had gone as well as they could have hoped. He said she was stable. He said the next 24 hours would tell them more. Emma's mother held her father's hand and did not say anything for a long time. Her coach drove home in the dark and sat in his car outside his house for 20 minutes before he went inside. The next morning, Emma woke up. She opened her eyes in the recovery room and she knew where she was and she knew what had happened, and she asked about her teammates. Not about herself, about the championships, about whether the girls were going to be ready. The nurse told her to rest, and Emma said she would rest after she knew they were okay. This is who she was. This was the person the sport had made her, or maybe the person she had always been, and the sport had simply revealed. Someone for whom other people's goals mattered as much as her own. Someone who could lie in a hospital bed with a fractured neck and still be thinking about the competition she could no longer be part of. Her teammates came to see her before they left for the Continental Championships. They came in a group, still in their warm-up jackets, bags over their shoulders, the quiet anxiety of pre-competition nerves mixing with the much louder anxiety of seeing their teammate in a hospital bed. Emma looked at them and smiled. She told them she was fine. She told them to go and compete and not to think about her. She said she would be watching. She said she wanted to see them do what they had worked for. She wished each of them luck by name. They boarded the flight. They went to the championships. They competed for their country the way they had always planned to. Emma's condition changed on the second day. The spinal cord, which had seemed to stabilize after the surgery, began to swell in a way that the first scans had not fully predicted. Swelling around the spinal cord does not always announce itself immediately. It builds quietly, pressure increasing in tissue that has no room to expand, and by the time the monitors begin showing the change, it has often already been happening for hours. The doctors responded quickly. They adjusted her medications. They monitored her closely, but Emma's body had absorbed more damage than the surgery had been able to fully address, and the damage was not finished making itself known. Her parents stayed at the hospital. Her coach came every day and sat outside her room because only family was allowed in. He brought coffee he did not drink and sat in the corridor and waited in the particular kind of silence that falls over people when they understand that waiting is the only thing left to do. Her teammates were in Cairo when she died. They were between competition sessions, sitting in the dining hall of the athletes' accommodation, when the message came through on the Federation group chat. One of them read it first and then just sat there for a moment before she said anything. Then she said it out loud, and the dining hall of the athletes' accommodation went very quiet, in the way that spaces go quiet when something happens that everyone in the room will remember for the rest of their lives. Emma Miller was 20 years old. She had fractured her neck on a foam pit that was 4 inches shallower than it should have been. She had survived surgery. She had woken up. She had said goodbye to her teammates with a smile. And then her body had stopped being able to fight, and she was gone before the competition she had spent 6 weeks preparing for had reached its final day. The gymnastics world noticed. Journalists wrote about the resource gap. They wrote about how danger increases when athletes train without safe equipment. They asked hard questions about what the sport owed to programs like Emma's, to young women in training halls with uneven pits and aging bar hardware, and no medical staff on site. The questions were good questions. The sport did not answer them in any way that changed anything structural. The season continued. The next championships were announced, and the year after that, another young athlete from another underfunded program climbed toward a bar and tried something his coaches should have known he was not ready for. His name was Danny Reyes, and he was 19 years old, and he had the kind of smile that people describe when they are trying to explain to someone who never met him exactly what the world lost. He was from a small island nation where gymnastics was new enough that his federation had only sent its first athlete to a major world championship 2 years before he joined the senior program. He had won gold at the national games at 16. At 18, he had made his international debut at a regional championship, competing on floor exercise and pommel horse, and the gymnastics community that paid attention to emerging programs had started writing his name down in the category of athletes to watch. His federation had listed him as a candidate for the next Olympics, still 3 years away. He was 19. 3 years felt like forever and no time at all. The training camp had been arranged in partnership with a larger federation in Eastern Europe. This was how it worked for small programs trying to accelerate their development. You sent your best athletes to train with better resourced programs, in better facilities, with access to coaching expertise your own country could not yet provide. Danny traveled with 3 teammates and 2 coaches to a Sports Palace training center that had been used to prepare gymnasts for world and Olympic competition for decades. The building was large and cold and serious. The equipment was first-rate, the foam pits were deep and evenly filled. On paper, this was exactly the kind of opportunity that athletes from developing programs needed. Danny had been working on the horizontal bar for 3 years. The horizontal bar stands nearly 10 feet off the ground, and the skills performed on it involve releasing the bar completely, flying through the air in a full rotation, and catching it again in a fraction of a second. The timing is everything. The body position in the moment of release determines everything that happens next. Elite gymnasts spend years building the muscle memory and spatial awareness that makes those split-second decisions automatic. They build toward complex release moves through a carefully constructed progression of simpler skills, each one teaching the body something it needs to know before the next step. Danny's coaches at the camp had been watching him train for 10 days. They had seen what he could do. They had also been pushing the training schedule hard because the World Championships were 5 weeks away and there was a lot of ground to cover. The skill they had him working toward was a complex release, a release move that the Russian Federation's vice president would later describe in an official investigation statement as something the athlete was not prepared to perform. That statement would come later. On the afternoon of September 14th, there was just Danny, the bar, the chalk on his hands, and a coach who said yes when he should have said not yet. Danny climbed up to the bar. He built his swing through 4 giants, each one faster than the last, the bar vibrating slightly at the peak of each rotation. His body was in the right position at the bottom of the swing. His speed was good, and then he released. He went into the rotation, and something in the angle was wrong. Too much or not enough, or both at once in the way that disasters sometimes are. He came down not into the center of the foam pit, but at an angle, his neck making contact with the foam at a degree that the foam was not designed to protect against. He disappeared into the blocks and did not come back up. His coaches were there in seconds. His teammates stood at the edge of the pit, frozen in the particular stillness that comes over people when the thing they have always feared in the back of their minds suddenly becomes real in front of them. Danny was breathing. He was alive, but he could not move his hands, and his neck was at an angle that nobody in that training hall wanted to look at directly. The ambulance came. The hospital was 20 minutes away. His federation was notified within the hour. His family was notified. The coaches from the larger federation made calls and filed reports and said all the things that needed to be said in the immediate aftermath. Danny was admitted to the intensive care unit, and the doctors began the work of assessing the damage to his spine and his spinal cord and deciding what could be done. Back home, his country waited. His federation president released a statement describing him the way people describe someone they genuinely love. His smile, his dedication, his refusal to complain, his constant enthusiasm, the way he made everyone around him better simply by being present. His teammates at the training camp were moved to a separate accommodation. The World Championships were still 5 weeks away. The training camp technically continued, though nobody's heart was in it, and everyone moved through the routines with the mechanical focus of people trying not to think about what was happening in the hospital across town. Danny was in the ICU for 12 days. His family flew to be with him. His federation coordinated with the host country's embassy and the local gymnastics federation and the hospital to make sure everything that could be done was being done. And for 12 days, the gymnastics community that had just started to write his name in the category of athletes to watch waited to find out what kind of story this was going to be. Danny Reyes died on the 12th day. He was 19 years old. His body was brought home to the island he had represented with everything he had, and his federation held a memorial that his teammates attended in their national team tracksuits because they did not know what else to wear and it felt right. The World Championships went ahead 5 weeks later. His country sent a team. They competed under the weight of his absence the way athletes always do, by showing up, because showing up is the only answer any of them know. The official investigation concluded that Danny had not been prepared to perform the skill that killed him. That sentence is the whole story in 8 words. Not prepared, and yet someone had said yes. Someone had looked at a 19-year-old boy from a small island program in a foreign training facility 5 weeks from the biggest competition of his life and decided that this was the right moment to attempt a skill he was not ready for. The investigation named the failure. It did not name the accountability. It never does. Emma Miller trained in a gym with an uneven foam pit and aging equipment and no medical staff on site, and she fell at the wrong angle on a Tuesday afternoon in May. Danny Reyes trained in a world-class facility with state-of-the-art equipment and qualified coaches from one of the most decorated programs on Earth, and he was handed a skill he was not ready for and told to try. The equipment was different. The outcome was the same. Gymnastics does not only fail its athletes when the facilities are poor, it also fails them when the pressure to perform overtakes the responsibility to protect. 2 young athletes, 2 training sessions that should have been routine, 2 investigations that asked what happened, but stopped just short of asking who should have stopped it. The sport is still beautiful. It is also still asking the wrong questions.